I'm Martha Kelso. I'm the CEO and founder of Wound Care Plus. We're a mobile group that covers numerous sites of care. We're kind of famous for our cars. We need to buy more fleets now that we've expanded into more states. But when I say mobile, it means we're going to the patient bedside and treating those wounds or the client or the resident wounds wherever they may be. Um, these are some of the sites of care that we've credentialed or that we actively service. And so it's a wide variety, and we don't always have internet or cell phone or hotspot access in these locations, particularly the critical access hospitals, the Indian Health Services, and then prison and correctional facilities. If we're going in there, they want us to take the least amount of equipment possible. And so to be able to cover a wide variety, we have to have a database that's customizable and unplugged, no internet required to chart. So you can sync at the beginning, get the patients downloaded, get them synced onto the device that you're charting on. And then at the end of the day, when you're done with your charting, you resync and it uploads to the cloud. The nice part about that is when you're syncing, it's about a minute or two, not much longer than that. And so it's very difficult to be hacked when you're not actively connected to the internet. That's one of my favorite parts. We are expanding. My goal when I founded Wound Care Plus almost 10 years ago was to go into 48 states. And as you can see, we're marching along. I think two of my biggest hampers to our expansion and growth was the pandemic, but also our former database. We are the original database I started the company with ended up shelving their system because they needed more of their IT resources on a different project. And so we had to switch quite quickly, even though we'd been searching for about 6 to 8 months. There was nothing really designed for mobile guys. So we went with a database that was really designed for wound providers, but not mobile wound providers. And so we switched in late 2018 and had a ton of problems. As a matter of fact, the database is what started preventing our growth, and it became painful. A lot of the turnover from our staff was directly related to the database. 67% of the time in 2023, we had providers resigning due to long hours from charting. And to the point that we were even watching or looking at timesheets, we had providers that were charting till 1 or 2 in the morning, getting back up at 6 or 7 in the morning, and doing it all over again. When you're required to chart with internet and you're transmitting photos back and forth, it slows the database down. Sometimes it can lose what you're charting. And so the providers were having to do a lot of duplicative charting or not even able to bill because certain pieces of the charting didn't save. And so we realized we can't keep doing this. We've tried for 5 years. We've tried working with the database to see if they could get up to speed with mobile guys, and they could not. And so we met Aran's, and Aran said, "Not a problem, Martha." It's like music to my ears. Not a problem, Martha. Okay, but we have to have provider charting. Not a problem. And so I'm going to show you some pieces that I customized into our database or helped with Aranza's engineers to customize. I don't think there's any such thing as a cookie cutter wound care company. We all have different protocols, different beliefs, different things that are near and dear to us that may not be near and dear to my colleagues or competitors. And so I wanted to show you some of the things that I made sure we customized into our database. The first thing is race. All the previous databases I've used in the wound care world, I could only select one race. Well, guess what? My kids are mixed race. And so even my children would have to select more than one race. That means our patients should be able to select more than one race as well. And of course, race can be exported and used for research or even analytics. So this becomes important. The next thing that I wanted to customize was religious preference. Why? because certain religions or societies or preferential beliefs, they may not want to use certain products. And so I've done a ton of research on this area. And I went to Iran's and said, look, this is complicated. I don't have a clue how to build this. And again, they said, not a problem, Martha. And one of their engineers worked tirelessly to make sure this works correctly. So if I say that they are Hindu, maybe my advanced wound specialists don't know that the Hindu population has an aversion to using cows inside the human body. And so it will pop this warning up to let the providers know that they need to not use bovine, and we're going to tell the patient we're going to avoid bovine products without their explicit knowledge and consent. So it helps tell the provider, hey, for the Hindu religion, don't forget about the aversion to bovine. Or perhaps you have a religion that doesn't want piscine or avian, and so it helps the providers choose, or perhaps human products. So Iran's allowed me to customize that specific to Wound Care Plus because it's something that's important to us. Another thing that was hampering our growth and our ability to bill and track appropriately, other databases were selecting MIPS codes based on outpatient wound centers. Well, some of the MIPS and macro codes that outpatient wound centers use are not the same codes that we would use in a mobile setting. And so once again, I've presented this problem to the Iran's team, and once again, I heard, not a problem, Martha. And so I gave you screenshots of some of the MIPS codes that we capture, and they allowed us to build these MIP codes straight into the database, and we can export them at the end of the year into these easily digestible reports, and then get them reported correctly to the federal government. So we're not missing out on our MIPS incentive points, right? Another thing that's interesting is for wound providers, when we are measuring for edema, we typically measure in centimeters. But the DME companies, in order to bill under Part B DME for compression stockings, they need it in inches. And so once again, I approached the engineers at Iran's and said, look, this is a problem. I don't want my providers to have to stop and calculate from centimeters to inches every time. So once again, I hear, not a problem, Martha. And so their engineers built in the logic. So if I enter 32 centimeters, the system will calculate that to 12.6 inches. That eliminates the red tape so the DME companies can get the compression stockings covered and delivered so our patients can get the care and the supplies and the tools that they need. Moving on, we do chart on the loss of protective sensation. And again, that's a MIPS point. And so I had them customize the loss of protective sensation, or the Simmons-Weinstein scale, directly into our database. So not only are we charting that assessment, but we are capturing it from MIPS. Same with the ABIs. I want it to calculate automatically. I don't want our providers having to stop, pull out a calculator, and figure out what the ABIs are. And so they built that, customized it straight into the database. Moving on with our wounds, one of the things that ICD-10 diagnosis codes require is if you have wounds to your phalanges, you do have to note if there's damage to the nail bed. That's a requirement of ICD-10. And yet our former databases, plural, did not have the ability to capture or chart that. So our providers didn't know they needed to chart on it, and it caused a lot of back and forth with being able to push those charts out for coding timely. So once again, not a problem, Martha. They've built it in, and so now our certified professional coders have what they need to accurately code the chart. My other favorite thing is it shows you where the wound is. Our former databases, plural, did not have that capability. So it'll literally point to the body part. So I know where I should be looking for wound number 1, 2, 3, 6, 12, 17, and 20. I can see exactly on the body where it's at and where I should be looking. It also shows me how many days that wound has been open. And so we chart the date the wound was first observed by any facility staff member or family member or resident. And then we can see exactly how many days that's been open. That assists us in choosing certain modalities to help get the wounds to heal. My other favorite thing, lighting in some of these care settings, residential care, long-term care, assisted living, is deplorable. Also, when you have deplorable lighting, you end up with deplorable blurry photos. That's not the case here. I can see every mark where there was a suture. I can see the suture line. I could probably see the belly button lint in here if I wanted to. There isn't any because their belly button's clean, but if there was, I'd be able to see it. Additionally, there's a view where I can see if the provider is getting the star right over the wound so that the depth of the wound is being captured adequately or appropriately. What's interesting is these photos are so clear, I can count almost every hair on the abdomen. I did not have images like this with any of my former databases. This helps with wound litigation. It helps with quality assurance. It helps the provider be able to track the wounds from week to week to see if we're progressing. Quality wound images equal better quality wound care. So on that particular person, you can see the graph shows that this wound is on a significant healing trajectory, and this is the graph that I'm looking for. I want to see that going down. If it's going down, we know that the volume and the area are getting smaller. The next thing they allowed us to customize was our visit details. There's certain things that we chart, for example, certifying whether or not that visit was face-to-face or a telehealth visit. That's important. It's also a requirement now from the federal government because we've been doing telehealth for COVID for so long. COVID, by the way, was the other thing that slowed the growth of our company. So COVID is one of those things that's outside of my control. Choosing a better database is inside my control. Additionally, Iran's allowed us to customize into Silhouette all the different sites of care that we cover, and they allowed us to put the most common sites of care at the top, and then the others, of course, are covered alphabetically. So all 99 sites of care, they allowed Wound Care Plus to build inside of our database. So if we are seeing somebody in a homeless shelter, we can accurately capture that site of care. They also allowed us to customize and bill in the consolidated billing requirements, which is a requirement from Medicare. And so there's three types of services that are subject to consolidated billing. The first is Med A skilled, Medicare Part A, and a skilled bed. The second is if they're on home health, and the third is if they are on hospice. And so we customized and built into our database the consolidated billing requirements. So if I say, is Medicare the primary insurance? And I say yes, this next box will pop up and say, well, are they on a skilled stay? If our advanced wound specialists say no, well, then the next box that pops up is hospice. So are they on hospice? Yes or no? And then based on that line of query, additional boxes will open or close and helping the provider only answer what they need to answer instead of going through hundreds of questions. Although it probably feels like they go through hundreds of questions anyway, but those are questions for our protocols. The other thing that Silhouette allows us to do through the Iran's engineers, sometimes there's things that we want to know about. One of those things that we're currently interested in at Wound Care Plus is the end of life skin and wound changes. And so I customized and built a end of life skin and wound changes decision tool. And so I was able to build in my own line of questions that we can now capture and export so that we can start to study some of these end of life skin and wound changes or skin failure type issues. Additionally, we asked the Iran's engineers to customize the tissue types. And what I mean by that is if it doesn't equal 100, the advanced wound specialist cannot pass go. And it'll even show them what percent is remaining. So right now, with what I've charted, there's 45% missing to get to 100%. Additionally, the Iran's engineers built in this exposed structure. In almost every other wound database I've ever used, it basically has four questions. Is there granulation, slough, eschar, or epithelial tissue? But oftentimes we may have scab or skin or other exposed structures. Maybe there's 10% bone in the base of the wound, and it's not allowing us to capture that. And so we asked Iran's to customize this for us, and they willingly did so. So now we can capture more appropriately different tissue types that commonly occur in wounds versus the standard four that most databases recommend or request that you chart on. We also built in the pressure versus non-pressure screening tool. I'm one of the authors of this tool. We authored it back in 2014, and it is the tool that allows us to screen if it's a pressure wound or not a pressure wound. And so I wanted this built into the database so that our providers are not incorrectly listing wounds as pressure, or the other way, not listing them as pressure when they are pressure. And so again, Iran's and their engineers customized and built this tool into the Silhouette software for us. Other things or sticking points for me, the burn scale. We know that if I click on certain parts of the body, if the body has been burned or affected, it would add up to a certain percent. Former databases that I've utilized all the way back to 2011 and beyond did not calculate it for us. The calculations were required manually. Our providers don't want to calculate manually. We're going into 2025 and the software should be smart enough to do this for us. So again, the Iran's engineers built this into our database. Additionally, other things, for example, if it's a partial thickness condition like dermatitis or pediformis, the database should be smart enough to only say partial thickness. Don't allow my providers to pick full thickness when this cannot be a full thickness wound, or vice versa. Maybe it's a surgical wound. Well, all surgical wounds are full thickness, so don't allow them to select partial thickness. And so the engineers went through wound type by wound type and built it in so that the pressure scale shows stages. The diabetic wounds show Wagner scales, and the grades for the Wagner scale, so on and so forth. So it helps lead our providers to the correct charting without having too much back and forth. Least painful database transition ever. Nobody quit, nobody cried, and we didn't have to have alcohol involved. So